Student learning strategies, are they helping or hindering their success? A mixed method study by Nancy Nelson and Robert Brennan, University of Calgary, 2020. There's a real range of approaches to student success in the post-secondary world. It goes from the institutional approach, which is data-driven and focuses on the retention of students. At the other end of the spectrum, we have a more personalized and holistic approach that focuses on each individual student. Somewhere in the middle is a student-centered approach that looks at what and how students approach their learning. This tends to focus on one of 5 areas: how well a student is connected within their program and institution, the type of mindset they have toward their learning, their ability to manage themselves as a post-secondary learner, the identity they have within their program and school, and their ability to tap into their academic capabilities. This particular study is going to focus on the self-management aspects. So to do that, we asked 3 research questions. First, what strategies do undergraduate engineering students use in order to be successful in their studies? Secondly, is there a difference between exemplary, average, and struggling students? And finally, is there a difference between what those students believe and what they actually do? To do that, we used a forced choice online survey that focused on 5 student success-related factors. First, how were those students using their time in class? What were their views on completing assigned work, their views on note-taking, their approaches to studying, and their overall work ethic? We chose to use forced choice questions to reduce the ability for students to fake or bias their responses. These questions were validated using Likert questions that asked the students about what they valued and what they did related to those 5 factors. So the students were from a very small engineering school in Canada. 115 were approached and 112 agreed to participate in the study. 70 actually completed the survey, 66 of which are included in the analysis. Looking at the demographics of those participants, we can see that the 1st and 4th year students made up the bulk of the participants at about 70%. Not to take away credit from the 2nd year students, but some of those were off campus during the study period, so they were not able to respond. Looking at the GPAs of those students, we can see that almost 60% of them were B students, about a quarter were A students, and the remaining were C students. Thurstonnian item response was done to look at those forced choice responses and the priorities that students put on those 5 factors. The one that received the lowest priority by the students was doing assigned work at only about 44%. Taking notes also got a fairly low priority at 45%, as did attending class at almost 50%, and establishing good study habits at 50%. So 4 of the 5 factors we looked at were rated very low on the priority scale by our students. Where we did see high priority was on work ethic at over 90%. So these were things like being able to avoid distractions, having a consistent place to work on schoolwork, and just to have good practices associated with being a post-secondary student. We use data mining to look at and try to identify characteristics associated with each level of students, so an A student, a B student, and a C student. We used RapidMiner Studio's auto modeling factor to predict the student's GPA, and the gradient boosted decision tree model was accurate to about 87%. So when we optimized it for A students, there was a significant relationship between their practice of doing assigned work and getting an A grade. There was a negative correlation between taking notes but a positive one about attending class. When optimized for B students, unfortunately, we saw a fairly strong negative correlation between a work ethic and getting a B grade. We also saw negative correlations between studying and attending class for B students. When we optimized for C students, we saw another negative correlation here for not doing the assigned work. We did see positive correlations between studying and attending class, but that not doing the work was the strongest of those factors. Then we did regression analysis on the data to see if there were any significant relationships between each of the 5 factors or any of those 5 factors and the student's GPA. So looking at the relationships for GPA first, there was only one that had a moderately significant relationship, and that was the priority students placed on doing assigned work. There were 3 strong relationships between the factors themselves. The first between those that valued taking notes and those that did take notes. Then between the value associated with attending class and actually attending class. And finally, between the priority placed on taking notes and taking notes. So the key takeaways for this study were threefold. First was that doing the work increases the chances of academic success. So this aligns with other work in engineering education research that shows that students do the work are more successful in their program. It also aligns with work that suggests that regular and deeper learning happens when students actively engage with the content in a meaningful way. So if we are able to assign work that selectively focuses on key concepts and skills, then the students' learning should deepen. We also saw that different behaviors were indicative of different levels of academic success. We didn't ask students why they were doing what they were doing, so we can't say for sure, but I think it's fair to say that cognitive overload has a role here. And if we can reduce that cognitive overload, which is exceeding the capacity of the working memory of students, by chunking the content, so breaking it into smaller chunks, modeling what we expect students to be able to do with that, scaffolding them or working with them through some examples, and then providing lots of opportunity for practice, we may see more effective learning. And then finally, we saw that the priorities students have do not always align with their practices and values. This is in keeping with other studies that found that even when students want to be successful, they sometimes get in their own ways. If we can provide some early interventions and help them recognize that balance is important and to look at their priorities, practices, and values regularly through the term with ongoing reflective practice, we might see some better learning. So I hope you found this research to be helpful, and I would encourage you to consider the effect that your students' priorities, practices, and values have on their academic success. If you can provide them with some guidance and structure, as well as rich opportunities to actually connect with what they're learning, I think we will see deeper learning both inside and beyond the classroom. Thank you very much for listening.